It was a Tuesday night, nothing special about it, just a dinner table. 4 chairs, the kind that wobble a little when someone shifts their weight. Someone had their phone out, not even intentionally, just scrolling while talking. And then the conversation drifted the way it always does eventually. Money. Not loud, not dramatic, just small comments. One person mentioning their mortgage rate, another talking about putting money into an index fund, someone else laughing about their 401k match. You know, the kind of conversation. You sit there, nod a little, take a sip of water, but your eyes drift to the phone in your hand. You open your banking app without really meaning to. The number on the screen sits there for a second. You look at it, then lock the phone. No one noticed, or at least you hope they didn't. Someone keeps talking about maxing contributions. You nod again, but you're not really listening anymore. Your mind does that quiet calculation people do when they don't want to. How far behind am I? Not out loud, just a quick thought that lands somewhere in your chest and stays there. And the strange part is, no one at the table said anything directly to you. No one accused you of doing something wrong. Still, you stare at the salt shaker for a second longer than necessary. Because in moments like that, it feels like everyone else received some kind of instruction manual. And you didn't. You smile, push your chair back. Conversation keeps moving. But that number from the banking app, it sticks with you the rest of the night. Let me say something that most financial conversations never say out loud. You're not lazy. You're not irresponsible. And you didn't secretly skip some class where everyone else learned how money works. I've spent more than 10 years working around finance, sitting in meetings, looking at portfolios, watching how people actually build wealth, not the Instagram version, the real version. And the truth is uncomfortable. Most people were never shown the system. Not really. They were shown rules, vague ones. Save more. Invest early. Be responsible. Find advice, but advice isn't a system. It's like telling someone to drive safely without ever explaining how the engine works. So people improvise. They guess. They open accounts because someone at work mentioned it. They stop investing because the news says something scary. They start again 6 months later. Back and forth. Meanwhile, they sit at tables like that Tuesday night dinner and assume everyone else must have it figured out. Most of them don't. They're just better at sounding confident while guessing. I've seen people managing 7-figure portfolios who still hesitate before making basic decisions. So if you've ever felt that quiet embarrassment when money comes up, I don't think that feeling belongs to you. It belongs to a system that never bothered explaining itself. There's a sentence people repeat so often it starts to sound like a law of nature. By 40, you should have 3 times your salary saved. You've probably heard it somewhere, a podcast, an article, maybe someone at that same dinner table. Technically, it's not wrong, but it's also one of the most misleading pieces of financial advice floating around, because it quietly assumes something about your life that may never have been true. It assumes the path was smooth, stable job, predictable income, no major interruptions. Reality rarely looks like that. People switch careers, businesses fail, parents get sick, markets crash. Life doesn't move in straight lines, but those benchmark rules pretend it does. I remember sitting across from a client once, mid-30s, solid job, smart guy. He opened his retirement account on his laptop and turned the screen toward me. He didn't say anything for a second, just tapped the table with his finger. Then he said something I hear all the time. I think I messed this up. The number on the screen wasn't small, not at all, but it didn't match the article he had read the night before. So suddenly the progress didn't count anymore. This is where those benchmarks become dangerous, because they turn direction into judgment. And direction is the only thing that actually matters. We treat wealth like a race with a fixed schedule. It isn't. It's a system that reacts to inputs. And once you understand the inputs, the timeline starts to behave very differently. Let me explain something that took me years to really see. We talk about wealth like it's a mystery, like there's some hidden trick. There isn't. It's mechanical, almost boring once you see it clearly. But people rarely look at the mechanics. They stare at the outcomes instead. They see someone with $1 million and assume the secret was intelligence, timing, maybe luck. Sometimes it is. Most of the time, it's something much simpler. Income, contribution intensity, time. That's it. Picture a bathtub. Money flowing in is the faucet. Growth is the water level rising over time. Most people obsess over the faucet pressure of the market. They ask, is this the right time to invest? Should I wait until things stabilize? But the faucet isn't the main variable. The size of the pipe is. How much money actually goes in? I've watched people earning 6 figures who invest almost nothing. And I've watched people earning half that quietly build portfolios that surprise everyone 10 years later. Because they increased the flow early, and they never turned it off. Here's another part people misunderstand. Compounding doesn't start slow because markets are weak. It starts slow because the base is small. The first few years always feel pointless. You check the account. Nothing dramatic happens. Maybe a few $1,000s. Maybe less. Then something strange begins to happen later. The same percentage growth suddenly moves bigger numbers. 10% on 10,000 is nothing. 10% on 500,000 changes how a year looks. But that shift only appears after the boring phase. And most people quit during the boring phase. They stop contributions when markets drop. Or they pause because something feels uncertain. That's where the system quietly resets itself. Not dramatically, just enough to delay everything. I might be wrong about some details of how markets behave over the next few years. No one really knows that part. But the mechanics themselves haven't changed in decades. Money added consistently, growing over time. That's the system people think is complicated. It isn't complicated, just unforgiving if you interrupt it. A few years ago, I met someone who still comes to mind when people say wealth is only for high earners. He wasn't. No startup, no inheritance. Just a normal job in operations at a logistics company. We met because he asked a simple question after a workshop. The kind of question people ask quietly when everyone else is leaving. How do I know if what I'm doing is enough? He showed me his account on his phone. Nothing dramatic, just steady numbers. He started investing in his late 20s. Not early, not some perfect start. Every month he moved money automatically into a simple index fund. The amount wasn't huge, $500, sometimes a little more when his salary increased. And here's the part most people expect to be exciting. It wasn't. For years, nothing about his account looked impressive. He told me he checked it less and less because it barely moved. But he never stopped the transfers. Not during the market drop in 2018. Not during the chaos of 2020. Not when everyone around him suddenly started waiting for things to calm down. He didn't debate it. The transfers just kept happening. 10 years later, we spoke again. He opened the same app. This time, he didn't tap the table nervously like that other client I told you about. He just turned the screen around. The number had crossed $500,000. No big stock picks, no crypto bets, no perfect timing. Just a quiet system running in the background while life moved forward. I remember looking at that screen and thinking something that still bothers me a little. Not because of what he did, but because of how ordinary it was. And how many people stop just before it starts working. Here's where most people get stuck. Not because they're incapable, because everything arrives at them all at once. Debt advice, investment advice, real estate advice, side hustle advice. It turns into noise. People try to fix everything simultaneously. And when that fails, they assume the whole thing doesn't work. But the order matters more than the effort. I've watched people work incredibly hard on the wrong step. Trying to invest aggressively while interest charges quietly drain their accounts every month. That's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. So the first thing is always the leak. High interest debt. Credit cards sitting at brutal rates. The kind where the balance barely moves even when payments are made. Until that pressure disappears, nothing else compounds properly. After that, stability. A buffer. Not something glamorous. Just enough cash so that a broken car or medical bill doesn't force everything backwards. 3 months, maybe 6. Most people underestimate how much calmer financial decisions become once that buffer exists. Only after that does investing really start to make sense. Not complicated investing. Just consistent contributions, automatic ones. The kind that move money before you have time to second-guess the decision. And eventually, this part takes longer. Income becomes the lever. Raises, new roles, better negotiation, sometimes entirely different careers. People think investing creates wealth first. Usually it doesn't. Income increases the flow. Investing multiplies the flow later. Get the order wrong and progress feels impossible. Get the order right and something strange starts happening. The system stops fighting you. Momentum begins to appear where there used to be friction. There's a belief that quietly discourages people. The idea that if you didn't start early enough, the window closed. I hear it constantly. Compounding only works if you begin in your 20s. That sounds logical, but I don't think people understand how uneven the process actually is. For a long time, nothing seems to happen. You invest, you wait. The numbers move, but not in a way that changes how life feels. Then something shifts. Not because the market suddenly became generous. Because the base grew large enough for the same percentage to start moving real amounts of money. I've seen people make more progress in 5 years than they made in the 15 before it. Not through genius, just through consistency, finally reaching scale. This doesn't mean time doesn't matter. It does, but starting correctly matters more than starting perfectly. I might be wrong about exactly how markets behave over the next decade. No one knows that part. What I've seen repeatedly, though, is this. When people stop interrupting the system, the timeline compresses in ways they didn't expect. Progress that felt decades away starts showing up much sooner. There's a pattern I've watched repeat more times than I'd like. It starts small. Someone looks at their accounts and feels a little behind. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet discomfort. So they close the app. They tell themselves they'll figure it out later. A few months pass. Now the gap feels larger. That same discomfort shows up again, but stronger this time. So they delay again. And that's where the real damage happens. Not from bad investments, from avoidance. Shame turns into silence. Silence turns into delay. Delay quietly stretches into years. I don't think we talk about this part enough. The financial system itself isn't the hardest thing people face. It's that emotional loop. Because once someone believes they're already too far behind, they stop interacting with the system entirely. And the system only rewards the people who stay inside it. Once you see that cycle clearly, though, something interesting happens. It loses some of its power. Not completely, but enough that you can interrupt it. Let me suggest something simple. Not a full plan, just movement. Within the next 48 hours, increase your automatic investment contribution. 2%. That's it. Not enough to disrupt your life, but enough that the system notices. Log into the account. Click the contribution setting. Raise it slightly, then leave it alone. No spreadsheets, no research phase. Just a small adjustment that keeps the flow moving. I've watched people spend months reading about investing while doing nothing. Meanwhile, a tiny change like that, 2%, quietly compounds for years. Motion matters more than precision at the beginning. You don't need the perfect strategy yet. You just need the system to start pulling you forward. I keep thinking about that dinner table. The one I mentioned earlier. Someone talking about their mortgage rate. Someone else casually mentioning their investment account. And the quiet moment when you check your phone. That number on the screen. I don't think the number itself matters as much as people think. Not tonight, not this year. What matters is the direction that number moves over time. Up slowly, then a little faster. Benchmarks make it sound like everyone is running the same race. They're not. Some people start late, some people start messy. But the system doesn't reward perfection. It rewards continuation. So maybe the real question isn't, am I behind? Maybe it's something simpler. Tomorrow night, when you open that banking app again, is the number moving in the right direction?